everyone, Joel Portsmouth here, Solutions Consultant with IT Smart Solutions. Just wanting to briefly talk today about conditional access. It's an advanced security feature that's part of Azure Active Directory, which is Microsoft's native single sign-on system similar to Okta and other solutions on the market. So it's built quite heavily into the operating system itself, the integration with Windows 10 and serves as the core sort of identity management and governance system throughout the entire Microsoft 365 system. And so conditional access, sort of as the name states, is really refers to setting policies and rules that define a set of conditions that an account must reach before it can access corporate data or the corporate network. And so you can see from this diagram here, it really allows us to sort of fine tune and have that granular level of control over what type of conditions need to be met for someone to access their account or not, beyond just simple having their password correct and their two-factor control. So an example is, their physical location. We can do things such as detecting the geolocation of someone from the IP address that they're logging in with. And if they're outside of Australia, for example, we can block their access entirely. So controls and sort of little markers or things that might indicate that something is possibly a risky login or a risky sign in and not legitimate, we can block that access entirely. Doesn't even necessarily need to be allow or block, so sort of black or white, one or two of those options. We can allow the login, for example, but then enforce a stricter set of controls and access limits than someone would have normally logging in. So for example, if someone's logging in from outside of Australia, we don't need to necessarily block the access entirely, but we can then enforce rules that say we'll let someone log into their account from outside of Australia, but we can then restrict their access during this login session to a particular set of folders, or we can say that they can't access data that's marked as sensitive or given a particular tag or sensitivity label in some sort of data loss prevention setting. So we allow the person into their account rather than block them entirely, but we can then put stricter controls in terms of what kind of data they access. So geolocation is just one of the many controls that are available. So there's controls surrounding the type of application or browser that people log in with, but then also sort of device level settings as well. So we can mark a device as not being compliant if, for example, it detects that the person isn't running a certain minimum version of the Windows operating system. So we can say if someone attempts to log into their account but they're logging in from a Windows version that's quite old, in which case, if it's not patched and up to date, it might be that it's susceptible to security risks. It's not fully patched, and so that might be indicative of the system being less secure. Again, we can then use that as a reason to block their access or limit their access with conditional access. And so on top of that, not just the operating system version but patch status, but we can also detect, is this machine that's accessing the network, does it have antivirus installed? So does it have Microsoft Defender installed and turned on? And so we can then start to sort of generate policies that say, people can't access the network unless they're running an up-to-date operating system that has antivirus turned on. So if you don't want sort of people accessing your data, accessing the network with very old, out-of-date versions of software that are susceptible to bugs and security vulnerabilities, and then they've also not got adequate antivirus installed, we can lock that down. And so that expands as well to mobile devices as well, and so that kind of ties into the data loss prevention side of things, where if you've we can't limit someone meeting these conditions on a corporate device. So, we can't say, maybe someone's working from home, and so they're logging in not from a corporate device that we can control. So they're logging in from a home device, and it possibly, is using Windows 7 or an older operating system, or it hasn't got antivirus turned on. Obviously, some of these things you can't control on a non-corporate device. So it's someone's personal machine that they use at home for hybrid work. We can lock those things down. We can impose tougher limits, prevent them from accessing certain applications, certain types of data, or turn their access off entirely. And that applies to a variety of other controls as well, which I'm going to show on the next slide now. So this is an example here on this slide of a particular example of conditional access. So you can see here we've got a user that logs in. It's picking up from that person's login what their role is in the business based on group memberships, the type of sign-in. We can see that it's also picked up the location and when they've last signed in. And then we can see here they're all sort of green ticks, so they're all sort of within the parameters of this particular example conditional access policy. But we can then see, for example, when we come to the next section and we're looking at the device side of things, the person was last seen on this device logging in from Asia. So this could be indicative of, that person's, still in Asia at the moment, and this attempt now to log in is, doesn't line up with that location. So it could be indicative of, this is someone impersonating this person from another country. Have they been able to travel that distance in that period of time? Now, look, of course, it could be totally innocuous. It could be that this person is London-based, but has now traveled to Asia and is a perfectly legitimate login attempt from Asia, and it is to be expected, although it could also be indicative of, this person is in London at the moment and shouldn't be in Asia, and this attempt is a malicious attempt from an attacker based in Asia, or vice versa. And so you can then see here, based on these type of things, as well as the configuration of the device is anonymous and the health of the device is also compromised. That can be referring to, browser-based settings, operating system version, antivirus enabled or disabled. As I mentioned before, this has now been marked as high risk, and so the action or the response as a result of that high risk is to block access entirely and affect whether the person can access these sensitivity levels here. So you can see, for example, medium sensitivity. But again, we can custom tailor these to your business so that the policy, if this is working as intended and expected behavior, perhaps the remediation action, isn't to block access, it would allow the access, or perhaps it is still considered a little bit risky, but rather than marking it as high risk, it's marked as medium risk, and so the action taken and the remediation is a little bit less or a little less strict. And so again, it's entirely dependent on your business and your business needs and what type of activity is considered malicious or risky to your business or not, based on geolocation. If you do a lot of hybrid work and you're expecting people to log in from personal devices, that may be a factor in the policy. Likewise, if people travel for business quite frequently, or if you have international based offices and people are moving back and forth, then a login from a different location that's outside of Australia might not be unusual or might not be unexpected, and so that wouldn't be the kind of thing in a policy that we configure for you that would trip sort of alarm bells or be any sort of warning. But again, it entirely depends on your business and your business needs. But conditional access, it's a really great tool, really sort of advanced type threat solution that allows us to kind of break these things down into more granular controls. It's not just as black and white as, if you know this person's password and you have that two-factor authentication, we let you in and you either have access or you don't. But it allows us to, like I said, define a lower level of controls and sort of more detail and say whether we define these as risky or not, and how that affects your access to resources on the network. And so particularly with hybrid work and COVID taking off, I think this is really important sort of cutting edge tool, in particular with people using their own devices. This is a really great way to still have a level of control over the security of the device that someone's bringing to the network, despite it not being owned by the business. So it's not a corporate device, it's a personal device. But if that device is not compliant, we still allow someone to work from home, but we just enforce a tighter set of controls that protects the integrity of the network. So we're not letting someone with no antivirus and an out-of-date operating system from home bring that into the network and possibly spread and infect other PCs, or some sort of ransomware that then affects the data and the data ends up encrypted or things like that. So by all means, if you have any sort of further questions, or if this is a solution you'd possibly like to look at implementing for your business as a way to tighten your security controls, along with a variety of other features built into conditional access itself and Azure Active Directory single sign-on as a whole, please feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to help. Thanks.